This is the second tutorial in our series on learning Autodesk Alias Design software for IDT 150 computer modeling. I'm your instructor, Josh Haldeman, and today we'll be learning to work with curves and surfaces by modeling the Alessi Model 9093 Teakettle designed by Michael Graves and introduced by Alessi in 1985. To get started, go to Blackboard and download the wire file. It's located up here under the Assignments tab, under Week 2, Alessi Teakettle by Michael Graves. The instructions are at the top. The file itself that we need to build is at the bottom. Right-click it, choose Save Link As, navigate to your desktop, choose the folder we created for ourselves last week, and call the file to Teakettle. Next, go into Alias, go to File, and choose Open. This will navigate you to the folder where the Teakettle file is located. Double-click it, and when it comes up and prompts you to delete all objects, shaders, views, and actions before opening this file, hit Yes. When it asks you to keep the current settings or accept the new ones, choose Accept New. This should give you these 4 viewports, and you'll notice this time we've got the picture of the Alessi Teakettle in all 4 views again. We're going to start the same way we did last time by turning off the canvas planes for all 4 views so we don't accidentally move them around. To do this, I need to go up to my Pick menu on the top left and choose Pick Nothing, Pick Object. And in any one of your views, go ahead and draw a box around all of the canvas planes. Make sure all 3 are selected. You can tell by the names. Go to Layers and choose New. Double-click where it says L1 and change that layer to one called Canvas. Then click and hold with your left mouse button and choose the Assign option. Next, go back to Canvas. Click and hold, go to Set State, and choose Inactive. That'll shut off those canvas planes so you don't accidentally move them around. The next step is to maximize your front viewport. This is the option that's in the upper left-hand corner. Single click that, and zoom in. You're using the Shift and Alternate keys again to zoom in, and your right mouse button. Zoom in so that the Teakettle itself fills your view, and so that you can see the details. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our CV Curve tool to create the outline of the profile of the body of the Teakettle. You do this by going to the Curves menu over on the palette on the left-hand side, go down to where it says CV Curve, which is the second tool in on the top row, click it once to activate that tool, and it's going to ask you to select the first CV position. Now in this case, I want to snap the middle CV, the first CV that I'm going to place, into alignment with the top of the Teakettle. So I'm going to turn on my Curve Snap, and I'm just going to click a point anywhere here to get started with because it'll automatically adjust to the nearest grid intersection. Now this may not be exactly where we want it, but we don't have to worry about that too much. We'll change it here in a minute. Now it's important, anytime you're planning on revolving a shape around the center of an object, that the second point on any CV be placed, CV curve be placed either horizontally or vertically aligned with the first one, depending on what axis you're rotating about, so that when you revolve the shape, that you don't have either a peak or a valley in the center. So the second point has to be right here because that's directly horizontally aligned with the first one. And when we revolve our shape, it will revolve around the middle and not have a peak or a valley. We'll just have a dome there. Now I can go up and I can turn off my grid snap, and I'm going to place the other points on my curve. To do this, I'm just going to select points along the profile path. So that would be there, and I'm going to put another one down here on the bottom, and I'm going to try and get it as close to the bottom of the Teakettle as I can, but not go under the base. When I place that last point there, you'll notice that I've placed a total of 4 CVs. This is the first time we're able to see the curve. That's because this is a degree 3 curve, and I have to place at least 4 points for the curve to be able to pop in. Once I've got that fourth point in, though, the curve itself snaps in, appears, and then you're able to make modifications to the line itself. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to first select nothing, but this time instead of choosing Pick Object, I'm going to go further down on the Pick menu and choose Pick CV. This will allow me to pick individual CVs along the curve instead of the entire curve itself. Now I want to move those points down, so I'm going to go to the Transform menu, choose the Move tool. Notice they're still selected. And again, remember the trick from last week for constraining your movement just up and down or left and right using your middle or right mouse buttons. This time we're going to move it just up and down. That would be on the Z axis. So we're going to use our right mouse button, and that will keep those 2 points lined up with each other, but it will allow us to change the position of those points in space so that they align more closely with the profile of the body. Now, if you weren't very precise with the placement of your points, or if you need to make some minor slight adjustments, you can do so. Just be careful not to move the second point so that it's not horizontally aligned with the first point. If you do that, you'll be okay. One additional thing to notice when you're placing these CVs is notice how the icons for each of the CVs is represented differently. The first point is a box, the second point is a U, then the third, fourth, and any points you place after that are all shaped like the letter X. The U is there for a couple of reasons, but ideally it helps you to choose the direction or identify the direction of the curve. So you can tell whether it's going one way or the other. Now, in this case, it doesn't matter because we know where we started and finished our line. But if we were to create a circle, as we'll do here in a couple of minutes, you'll be able to tell why it's important to tell where the second point is on there. Now that we've got our curve built, the next thing we want to do is revolve it around to create the body itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the palette, scroll down until I find the Surfaces menu, choose the Revolve tool, which is the one over here. And one thing I need to do is make sure I double-click that tool to choose the correct axis. By default, it's on the X, and I want to make sure that it's on the Z when I do this revolve in order to get it to go around the right axis. Again, look in the corner for your indication of which axis is the correct one. When you click that line, it automatically revolves the shape following all the basic guidelines that are in here, including sweeping the curve around 360 degrees, dividing it up into one segment. It's a degree 5 surface, and the axes that it's revolving around are local, and that's pretty much all you need to know. You can go ahead and shut this box, and in order to see the surface that it's created a little better, you can move over to the perspective window. One thing to know in this file is when you first open the perspective window in here, your camera is locked. So if you try and move around your scene using Shift and Alternate, you won't be able to do anything. It won't be able to move. Don't panic. It's simply because you have the render camera selected. The way to select the working camera is to go up to the top where you see this little icon here that looks like a camera inside of a box. And instead of having the render view camera selected, choose the working camera. The view looks slightly different, but you'll now be able to move around your object. Additionally, if you want to see your shape in a little more detail, you can go to the Window Display menu and choose Hardware Shade. This shows us what we've got now. Also, you may have seen over there in the corner. If you rotate around your view, you'll notice this big blue box here. That's there to help us have something to reflect off the body later on when we go to do rendering. We don't need to worry about that for now, but leave it there. It is important to have it. Now, what I would like to do, actually let me stay in the perspective window here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to create the base for the tea kettle because it's not hollow, it's solid. So to close it off, there's a very simple tool you can use called Planer, actually called Set Planer. If you go over to the Surfaces menu, it's the one that's right next to the Revolve tool in that top row. Click it with your left mouse button, and then just click any of the edges at the bottom of the tea kettle body. That's it. It'll highlight that edge to confirm that that's the one that you want, and then it'll show a Go button in the bottom right-hand corner. Go ahead and hit Go, and it fills it in for us. Shift alternate again if you want to move around so you can better see what we've created. And one of the neat things here that I'd like to show you before we move on to the next step is the concept of construction history. This is something that Alias employs, which is really, really cool. Makes things a lot easier when you're trying to fix something if you make a mistake. Let's say that when I created the profile curve for the body of the tea kettle that I didn't quite get it exactly where I want it to be. I got it close, but it's not perfect. Well, that's not a problem because I can adjust it. And if I adjust only the curve, it will also adjust the shape of the surface that curve is based on. So the way that I do that is I go up to the pick menu, choose pick nothing, pick CV, select a point, and I'm just going to pick one down here in the middle, and just to demonstrate this, I'm going to move it way out. And let's say I move it out to there. Notice how it automatically adjusted the shape of the body. And again, I can turn on the hardware shade if you want to see that a little better. Now, obviously, that's not the right shape, but you get the idea. All I did was change the shape of the curve, and it adjusted the shape of the body accordingly. A construction history is something that's built into almost everything that you create manually within Alias. There isn't any on primitive shapes, but there is on objects that you create yourself. So it's a very, very handy tool. You do want to make sure you know about it when you're modeling. The last thing that I want to do before I move on to the next part of the tea kettle is I want to make sure that I'm organizing the parts of my object into layers. This is important because when you create complex models, sometimes the geometry itself can get a little overwhelming. And so getting used to creating those layers and assigning your objects to those layers will help you keep things in line and on track. So I'm going to go into my perspective window to do this operation. I'm going to go in and choose pick nothing, pick object. This will ensure that I've got everything that I want deselected here. And then I'm going to just pick all the parts that I've created so far for my tea kettle. So that's the body, the base, and the curve that I used to create the body. Then I'm going to go up to the layers menu and I'm going to choose new. This will add another new layer, just like we did when we created the canvas layer. And I'm going to create a new layer that's called body. With that layer now named, I'm going to pick it and assign those new objects to that layer. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn that layer to the reference mode. What that does is it temporarily turns off my geometry so that I can't see it, but that I can refer to it. So if I need to, say, snap to a curve or do something along those lines, I can still do that with the body in reference mode. I can also still see the outline of it, even though it's in gray, or in sort of this tannish, grayish sort of color. It's a little subtle, but you can see that it's there just barely. All right. So now that we've gotten this far, the next thing I want to do is make sure that I save my file out. So go to File and hit Save As. Remember, you always hit Save As the first time you save your file to ensure that you get the correct file name. Again, I'm going to put my name on the end of it to make sure that I have it saved separately from the original document. The next thing that I'm going to do is create the handle for the tea kettle. That's the little part that goes in here, not the grip itself. We're going to do that next, but we're going to do the little part of the handle. To get started with this, I need to use a tool called the 3-point arc tool. This one's got, it's hiding a little bit. You have to go to the curves menu on the palette, on your left-hand side, and go down to where it says KPTBX. That stands for Key Point Curve Toolbox. Go ahead and click that once to open it, and you'll notice that in here you have a bunch more tools. This is kind of a detailed menu for the key point curves. The tool that we want to use is the 3-point arc tool. It's in the second row, first tool on the left. Click it. And then I'm going to tell you that the best way to create this arc is to kind of eyeball it. I want to imagine that the arc for the handle is continuing on inside of the body of the tea kettle, and that I want to draw it from that point, somewhere inside of the body of the tea kettle on the left-hand side, in order to give us a good idea of where the handle is going to go, and also to make sure that when we create it, that it goes inside the body of the tea kettle. The second point I'm going to place up here, and the third point I'm going to place again on the inside of the tea kettle, but this time on the right-hand side. So again, imagine that that line continues into the body, and then click a point anywhere there to create it. Now, that'll give you your basic outline of your arc. You can see that it's constructed the arc here. It's showing up in white. It's also giving you these guide curves here, which can be useful if you're trying to center things around that arc. But in this case, they're kind of distracting. They get in the way a little bit. So if you do want to shut those off, you can go up to Window Display, go down to Toggles at the very bottom, and turn off the guidelines. Those will make those disappear, and that way you can see just the arc itself, not those guidelines that are associated with it. Now that I've created the shape, you can see that I've got a little bit of a misalignment on the curve itself. It's okay on this side, it's okay right about here, but on the other side of the object, it extends out a little too far. You can fix that by dragging the key points that you've placed. That's using this drag key point tool. You can't pick CVs or edit points like you can with other things up in the pick menu, because they're not CV or edit points. They're key points in this case. So this is the only way you can pick them. When you select it, you can move those points either in or out to make the adjustments that are necessary. And again, any of the points to move them anywhere you need them to be. And it's a little tricky. It takes a little bit of getting used to when you first start. But if you take your time, if you get that positioned exactly right, then you'll get a lot better at it very quick. Now, the next thing that I want to do is, this is going to be the path for my handle to be created around. What I need to do is I need to create a profile, a shape for that handle to be, and it is round. So the profile shape that I build will be a circle. Well, luckily, over in the Curves menu, I have a primitive circle tool. So let's just go ahead and click that, make this simple. Snap to curve using the snap tool that's in the upper right-hand corner. And then I'm going to click on that 3-point arc that I just created and modified, and I'm going to drag that circle down to the start point of the arc on the left-hand side. Now you'll notice when you initially place it, the circle comes in too big. We need to scale it down first. So if you want to scale it manually, you can. Choose the scale tool and just click anywhere on the screen outside of objects and hold with your left mouse button and drag to the left. That'll make that object smaller. You can also drag up or down if you want to adjust the shape a little quicker or a little slower. Now that's about the size of the handle itself. It's not very big, but it's not the correct direction yet. If I try and extrude this shape along this path, then it's going to be in the wrong orientation. It's just going to give me a little flat object. So the next step then is to rotate that circle into the correct orientation. I'm going to do that by choosing the rotate tool, and I'm going to type in these values up at the top, and I'll explain why I'm doing these values here in a minute. But it's 90, 0, 0, and then hit enter. What that does is that rotates my object around the x-axis 90 degrees, around the y 0 degrees, and around the z 0 degrees. So I'm now looking at a profile of that same circle that I created there, but it's just now I'm seeing it edge on instead of straight on. Now I want to keep rotating it around that direction there that I can see. That's the y-axis that I want to revolve it around now. Because what I want to do is I want to try and align that circle to be perpendicular to the start of that arc. So I'm using my middle mouse button, and I'm dragging either up and down, left and right, or whatever I need to get it to do the right thing. And I'm going to try and find a point where it looks perpendicular. Now, it does not have to be exact. Your goal is to try and get it as close as possible, but it does not have to be exact. If you're not sure if you have it right, the best thing to do is move on to the next step. And if it doesn't look right at that point, then you can come back and adjust it, because this surface will also have construction history. So to create this shape now, the way that I'm going to proceed is, again, scroll down to the Surfaces menu on the palette, and I'm going to choose the Extrude tool. The Extrude tool is also hidden. It's on the second row, the second tool in. Click and hold that tool with your left mouse button, and then choose the Extrude tool that's underneath. That's the second one in on this little sub-menu. When you've got that, it's going to come up and it's going to ask you to either select or deselect curves to extrude or hit the go button. The reason it's asking this is because we already had our profile curve selected, so it's seeing that selection and saying, okay, is there anything else you want to add to that selection? Yes or no. If the answer is no, which it is in this case, go ahead and hit go on the bottom of your screen. And now, up in the prompt line at the top in the white area, it's asking you to select the extrude path. That, in this case, is the 3-point arc. When you select it, the 3-point arc and the the circle that you created combine together to create this handle shape. And again, if you want to see that in the perspective view here, we'll move over there so you can see it. And that looks pretty good. It looks like it maintains its shape pretty well all the way around, and it goes onto the inside of the Teakettle body. That'll ensure that we don't see these endpoints. We don't see that it's ending before it completes the circle, and it'll have the illusion that the shape is complete. If you want to see what that's going to look like, you can turn the body back on by going to the body layer, going to set state, and choosing pickable. That'll make it solid again. And then to see the final result, go up to the top, choose pick nothing, and you can move around your scene there. You can zoom in on the parts where the handle intersects the body, and you can see that there's no part that's sticking out there. It looks like it's completely intersecting. Now that I've got the handle created, I'm going to place it onto a layer that has the name handle. So to start that, again, go up to the top, go to layers, choose new, and when it pops up the new layer, double click it and rename it handle. I'm going to assign two things to this layer, and I'm going to go to the front view to do this, make it a little easier. And I'm also going to turn off the hardware shade so I can see things a little better. I want to assign the surface here. Let me pick it. Choose pick nothing, pick object. Pick the surface and the profile that I used to create that surface, but not the path. I'm going to leave that in there for a minute because I need to use that for something else. With those two selected, I'm going to go up to the handle layer and assign them to that layer, and then set the state to reference. I'm doing that one that way. In fact, I'm actually going to turn it to inactive so I don't accidentally pick it. But I'm doing that way because I want to use my 3-point arc, the one I created originally, to create the new 3-point arc that I'm going to use to create the grip, which is my next step. In order to start the grip, what I'm going to do is hold down Shift and Alt in my front view and use my middle mouse button to scroll up so that I can see the handle part of the Teakettle body. The next thing that I want to do is I want to place another 3-point arc. Remember, that was over here under the Key Point Curve toolbox in this Curves menu on the palette. The 3-point arc is the second row, first tool on the left. And in this case, I need to snap to the curve, so I want to make sure my snap to curve is still on. And I'm going to snap to this curve here, which is the one in the middle. Now, the second point can be anywhere between the first point and the end of where I want the grip to be, so I'm going to place it right about there. And the third point, I'm going to click here and just drag it down right to the base. Now, because I had the curve snap on, it placed that 3-point arc directly over the top of the original 3-point arc. And that way I don't have to worry about whether or not it's aligned. I can double check this by going to the perspective window and moving around. You do want to make sure that your handle layer is set to inactive, because if you can accidentally select a side of the surface there, if it's on reference or if it's still pickable. So you have to make sure the handle layer is set to inactive in order to be able to do this operation correctly. But that is correct. It is in line. Again, you can tell if you go to the front view that it's a straight line segment, that it's not rotated or twisted or anything like that. By the way, you saw me using the view cube there. The view cube is useful for quickly changing between viewports instead of having to constantly maximize and minimize individual viewports. If you're in the perspective window and you want to go back to the front view or the right view or the top view or whatever, then you can use this view cube to check things. I'm continuing to go back and forth between here and the other views because my reference images are located in those views. I don't have any in the perspective view, so if I go to left, you'll notice I have no background, no reference. I'm also going to turn off Curve Snap here for a minute to do this next part. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to create a circle and I want to snap it to that curve. Actually, I want to leave that curve snap on. I want to create a circle and snap it to that curve. So again, this is under the curves menu, the circle tool, and I'm actually going to do one thing before I do this next step. I'm going to go to Pick Nothing, Pick Object, select the arc, and assign that the original 3-point arc, not the new one I just finished, but the original 3-point arc. So make sure you click outside of where the grip is. Go to the handle layer and assign it there. What that'll do is ensure that I've got just the new 3-point arc tool on. Everything else is on that handle layer and is set to inactive. Now, when I click to place a new circle by using the circle tool under the curves menu, then and when I click on that line, I'll ensure that I have the correct line. Again, I'll snap it to the endpoint. I'm going to start at the top, and I need to scale it down. I can do this quicker if I type in 1. That's a little too small, so let's make it bigger. I want to make it roughly the diameter, or as close to exactly the diameter, actually, of the grip. So that's pretty close right about there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate that. This time I'm going to rotate it a different direction just to show you it's possible. 0, 0, 90. This will rotate around the Z axis. So that'll give me, again, an edge-on profile view of that circle, but now it's vertical instead of horizontal. Now, when I manually rotate again around the Y, I'll be able to, oops, sorry, I forgot I rotated it. It'll be around the X this time. Now that I rotate around the X, I can make sure that it's lined up with the geometry. Now, in this situation here, again, when I'm trying to look for alignment, I want to make sure that I'm aligned so that I'm perpendicular to the start of the 3-point arc, and that may or may not be lined up with the reference image. It may not be perfect. You can see it's a little off there, but it looks more perpendicular to my line. And again, remember, once you start creating geometry, it's more important to snap to the geometry than to use your reference images at this point. Okay, so now I've got my profile and my path. I'm going to turn off my curve snap here. And what I want to do is I want to again extrude this profile along that path. And I can do that by scrolling down to the Surfaces menu on the palette. Choose the Extrude tool, which is now on top because that's the one we used last. And again, it'll automatically select that first circle as the shape that we want to extrude. That's because it was selected. And then hit Go. And then choose the profile that we want to extrude that that shape along. And again, I'd recommend checking it in the perspective window to ensure that it did the operation correctly. And again, if you need to turn on the hardware shade, you can. I need to also turn on my handle so I can see that. And it looks pretty good. The only thing that I'm missing are the end caps for the grip part. You can see that it's hollow in the center there. And so I'm going to fill those in, again, using the planer tool. Hit File, Save here to save your progress so far. Go to Pick Nothing, Pick Object. Scroll down to the Surfaces menu and choose the Planer tool. Then pick the edge of the object here, and you'll notice that it'll give you options. You can pick either the circle or the extrude. You want to pick the extrude because you want your planar surface to align with the edge of the geometry that you created, the surface here, not the original circle, even though they are actually the same shape correctly right now. You can only do one of these at a time because the complete selection has to be planar. In other words, every point that I've got selected here has to be in line with all the other points. And it is, if you look at it from a left view here, you can see, scroll up, that they're all in line. Even though they're at an angle, they're all in line with one another. So when I do this, scroll back to the perspective view, I'm going to hit go, and that will fill that in. Now, I do want to make sure that I don't forget the bottom when I'm doing this. It's easy to do. So go to the other side. Planar tool is still picked, so all you have to do is just pick that edge and hit go again. And it'll also fill that side in. All right, so that's our geometry so far. It's looking pretty good. Last thing we're going to do on the grip is build a new layer for it to rest on, and then move on to the next part. So again, the way to do this, go to Layers, choose New, double-click the new layer, and name it Grip. And then assign all those objects that we created to that grip layer. That would be all the surfaces here, the curve as well, the circle at the beginning. And there's also another curve on the inside that we need to place there, but I'm going to turn off the handle layer before I select that because it's over the top of another piece of geometry. So let's assign this first to the grip layer. Let's go up and shut it off temporarily just so we can see the other one. Now, there's a different way to shut things off too. If you don't want to make it inactive, you can also go to the grip menu here and choose the visible option. That'll just make it completely disappear, which is kind of nice. It makes it possible to be able to see what's underneath. Now I can go back. I can go to the handle layer, do the same thing, in fact, and that'll leave me with just that one line, that 3-point arc that I've got that needs to go on the grip layer. So now I can choose Pick Nothing, Pick Object, select just that arc, and assign it to the grip layer. Even though the grip layer is off, it's okay. It'll still assign. It knows the layer's off, so as soon as it's assigned to the layer, it shuts off. Now we can go back. We can turn those two things back on, and we're done manipulating those shapes. Make sure you hit File, Save one more time before we move on to the next part. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to put the decoration that occurs at the ends of both sides of the grip. You can see this a little bit better. Well, you can see it in the front view. If you go in here and you turn off the hardware shade, you can see that it's these little spheres that are on both sides. And they're a fairly important design element for the model so that you can tell what it is. So we want to make sure that we include that. Consider what we need to do here. If I want to place that sphere in the middle of the grip and the middle of the handle, then I need to place it in such a way that it'll definitely be in the middle of that part. There's a couple of different ways that I could do that. I could snap it to the 3-point arc on the inside of my grip handle here. I could also snap it to the little grid lines on the planar surface here. In fact, notice that there's a point right in the center of that, which I could snap to. Let's try that. Come down to the Surfaces menu, choose the Primitive Sphere tool. This is the same primitive tools that we were using last week to do the Alessi, to do the Rietveld chair. But this time, instead of using the cube, we're using the sphere. And I'm going to turn on the Curve Snap. And I'm just going to pick in an area where there's nothing else behind the object. What I mean by that is look for the lines. I'm not worried about actual surfaces, but look for the lines that represent those surfaces. And click on one of those on the middle part of that planar surface at the end of your grip. Then drag to the middle point. You'll notice it'll snap to that point. You'll actually stop there. And that's going to the sphere is going to come in really big to begin with, so we need to first scale it down so we can see what we're doing. Let's scale it again to 1. That'll make it easier to see, and then we can figure out how big to make it. So now we can see it. We'll go to the front view to make the scaling change. And you can see there's a bit of a problem here. The sphere is in the middle, but it's not located where the sphere is on the handle. The sphere on the handle on the reference image is actually completely outside of the grip. I'm going to show you a quick way to change the position of this thing without having to move it or risk accidentally putting it in the wrong place. So what I'm going to do first to make this work is I'm going to set the pivot point with curve snap still on, and I'm going to move the pivot to the edge of the sphere instead of in the middle. Then I'm going to go back to my perspective window. It's important to be able to have the flexibility to be able to jog there between views. And then choose the Move tool, and again click the same line that I clicked to initially place that sphere. What it'll do is it'll move the object because it's moving it in relation to where the pivot point is. So now I've moved it out so that the entire sphere rests outside of the grip. Now when I go back to the front view, you can see the only thing I have to do is just rotate it down so it lines up. I'm going to do that by using the Rotate tool. And which axis do I want to rotate around? Look at your navigation helpers in the corner. Notice you can see the Z and the X, which means that the one that we want to rotate about is the Y, the one we can't see. So that'll be the middle mouse button. And we just want to click and hold. And again, I'm looking at where the geometry will line up, not where it's going to line up with the reference image. Fortunately, in this case, those two are pretty close to one another. Now that was a lot of work to get that sphere positioned there and located correctly. You can see it in the hardware shade. That's what it'll end up looking like. But I don't want to have to do all of that again. A couple of issues with trying to repeat those steps. First of all, creating a new sphere. Remember, I didn't give the sphere a specific size. I scaled it up to look like the reference image. So trying to duplicate that again and then get it exactly the same will be very, very challenging. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is just duplicate it. And then I'll move it down here. And that should make placing the other one fairly easy too. So again, the shape is selected. The sphere that's up here is already selected. So go to Edit, Duplicate, and choose Object. Then take that duplicated object, remember it comes in directly over the top of the first one, and move it, and come down here to the other side, and I'm going to zoom way in on the handle here so I can see the detail of it. And I'm even going to turn off my hardware shade momentarily just so that I can see where the line needs to be. Make sure your curve snap's on, and then snap that to the middle point. Then again, go back to your front view, and all you'll need to do is just rotate that into position. And again, remember, when you rotate, you want to make sure that it rotates around the the geometry that we've got created, not to the reference image. And again, it's the Y-axis. So just simply rotate it down there. All right. So that's it for the grip decoration. We've got those parts on there now. If you want to go in and you want to add the toruses that rest behind that, you can do that as well. You can use the same procedures for that, but it's the same procedure, so I'm not going to cover it again. You could put these grip decorations on the grip layer if you prefer. That's fine. I'm going to pick them both by choosing Pick Nothing, Pick Object, selecting them both, going to the grip layer, and then assigning those objects. All right. Make sure you save your file. And then we'll go on to the next step. The next thing that I want to do to create a convincing model of our Alessi Teakettle is I want to create the spout for the tea kettle. Again, we can refer to the shape of this in the front view. It's been very handy today. And you can see that the spout itself is relatively straightforward. It's basically just a conical shape that's cut off by the end of the spout itself. and it's at a bit of an angle. So we've already done that for a couple of different things in our view. When we created the handle, we created a circle and we revolved it or rotated it into position, and then rotated a little more to be at a perpendicular angle. We're going to do exactly the same thing here. If I choose the circle tool, and I'm going to turn off my curve snap so to make sure I don't accidentally snap something I don't want. And I'm just going to kind of try and eyeball the middle of the spout here. I may not get it exactly right, but I'll get it pretty close, and then we can adjust it. And I'm going to take that middle line that bisects the width of the spout there, and I'm going to drag it into the inside of the body of the tea kettle again. Again, that's so that the spout completely intersects the body. And I'm going to place the first circle for the spout here. I'm going to then scale it down. Again, let's try a size of like 3 this time. I know it's bigger than 1. 3 is still too small, but we can now scale it up and get that thing to be about the right size of the base of the tea kettle. Now we may need to scale that up or down, but let's check it out. Let's see how far we can get. Next thing, I'm going to rotate it, and this time I can rotate it around either the X or the Z. It really doesn't matter. I need to rotate it again anyway, so 90, 0, 0 gives us that. If I rotate again, I'm going to rotate around the Y, and this will allow me to rotate it into position so that it's perpendicular to the spout itself. Now, that's my base. All I need to do to create the rest of the spout is copy that and scale it down and place it at the top. So edit, duplicate, object, move it. Remember, click outside of the object to move stuff. And here you can tell how close you got it to being aligned correctly. If it's slightly off, you can correct it. Again, move it into position, rotate it down. Make sure you rotate around the right axis. The Y is correct. And then to scale it all down, make sure you're on the scale tool and use your left mouse button to scale it left and right and up and down so that it's smaller. Now I've effectively got these two circles that are roughly aligned with one another. One on the inside is a little bit misaligned, but it won't make a whole heck of a lot of difference. The only thing I do want to make sure of is that I've got it far enough inside of the body to be completely within it. And that's really hard to tell in wireframe mode. Probably the best thing to do is go ahead and complete the surface and then just check and see how it was created. We're using a new tool to create this surface. It's one that's called Skin. Skin is probably the single easiest tool to use in Alias. It's under the Surfaces menu, second row down, first tool on the left. Pick it, and then just pick the circles that you want, or the shapes that you want. And what it'll do is it'll figure out the skin, the shape that needs to go between those two shapes. And that's it. It's really, really simple. Again, if you want to see what it looks like with hardware shade on, we can do that to check that the spout part is going far enough inside the body that it's not, the end of it's not sticking out anywhere, and it looks like we got it pretty good. Great. Okay. We can save the spout and the parts of the spout as part of the handle. So that would be the two circles, part of the body, sorry. That would be the two circles. I need to shut off my hardware shade to be able to see the inside one. And the skin surface itself. I'm going to apply all of those to the body of the tea kettle. And then hit File Save. Okay, for the last part of the modeling for the tea kettle that we're going to do today, I'm going to create the knob and the base that the knob sits on at the top of the tea kettle. And again, I'm going to the front view to start this one off. You'll notice that our reference image is a little off center, but that's okay. We know where it needs to be, so we'll use the points that we know are correct instead of the ones that we know are slightly off. But if you go down to the Surfaces menu, go to the primitive tools, click and hold with your left mouse button, and choose the cylinder tool. Turn on Curve Snap, and pick that initial curve, the first one that we created today, and drag it to the center at the top. Next, we'll scale that down, and I'm again going to scale it to size of 1, and I make it a little bigger than that because it's a little bigger than that. And I'm looking at my reference image to determine what the correct width should be. Like I said, it's a little offset, so it can be a little hard to tell, but we can get it close. Next, I'm going to rotate this into position, and this is rotating around the x-axis, so it's 90, 0, 0, because right now we're looking at the cylinder from the top. Now we're looking at it from the side. Now I can scale it down, and I'm going to do this. I don't want to do it horizontally. I want to make sure I do it vertically, because remember, I just rotated my object. So if try out your mouse buttons, if it doesn't look like it's going to go the right way, then undo and try the other direction. If it still doesn't work, then it's probably the only direction that you still need. And this is the case where you want to be able to make sure that you know how to use the Zero Transforms tool. That was one that we talked about last week a little bit in class. But zeroing the transforms will set it up so that your axes reset for the object. So when we rotated the object, we rotated the axes. In this case, we went 90 degrees, so we don't need to worry about the object distorting if we scale it. So just setting them back to 0 means it resets the axes back to the world axis. So now, to adjust the height, I use my right mouse button, and that'll give me the correct height. And even though the reference image is offset one way, it's actually is the correct height. So we can scale it to that height, and we'll be okay. Now I want to place my my sphere for the top, and you know what? The method we use to create the grip decoration is also the appropriate method for creating the knob in the center of the lid. So I'm going to go to my perspective window to get started here. Scroll up so I can see the top of that lid here. And if you're having trouble getting your camera to zoom to the right place, make sure that you hold down Shift Alternate and pick a point in your scene. And then when you move your mouse, when you move your left-hand mouse button to tumble around your view, it'll rotate around that new pivot point. Then we can create a new primitive sphere. Make sure you click and hold on the primitives tool. Choose the sphere option, and make sure curve snap is on. Then just pick an edge of one of the top parts of the sections of that cylinder and drag to the middle. Scale it down. Let's try 5. That might be close. And let's go back to the front view to see if 5 is correct. It's still a little small, but before we resize it so that we can make sure we get it right, let's move the pivot point on this axis here all the way to the bottom, and then reposition our sphere on top of the cylinder. So I'm moving it again. Curve snap still needs to be on, and then snapping again to the center point. Now that'll put my sphere where it needs to be, and it has the added advantage of when I scale it, it'll scale up from that point. So now I can tell exactly how tall to make my sphere, and now it's also the right width because I'm scaling universally using the left mouse button. And that's pretty much it for the modeling of the geometry. Hit File, Save to save your file out. And then make sure that you put the last parts of your object here, the cylinder and the sphere, on any layer that you want that'll help you to organize things. If you want to create a new one, you can do that. If you want to put it on the body layer, that's fine too. But do that and then hit Save again, and we're good to go. For the last part of this exercise, what I'm going to do is show you a couple of tricks on how to assign shaders that look like the actual shaders that need to be used to represent an Alessi Teakettle. So I'm going to start in the perspective window to be able to see all of my geometry. And I'm going to do one thing real quick here just to make it a little simpler to pick the surfaces. I'm going to reorganize my layers a little bit. I'm going to do this by going to the layers and choose new. With the new layer, I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it curves. Let's make sure I spell it right. Then I'm going to pick all the curves that I used to create all the surfaces in my view, and I'm going to assign those surfaces to, assign those curves to the curves layer. That'll separate them out, and it'll make it easier to just pick the surfaces in my view. There's an easy way to do this. I can go in and I can pick them individually, but there's also an easier way to do this. If I choose Pick Nothing and Pick Component, which is the third tool over on the Pick menu on the top row, it'll pop up a set of icons next to your prompt line there at the top. You can go through and shut all of them off except the one that looks like a wavy line there. And then that'll restrict your selections to just the curves. So if I draw a box around everything, it'll pick just the curves. Then I can assign them, just them, to the curves layer. Now you'll notice it also changes the color of some of the surfaces in our view here. That's to indicate that there's construction history related to those surfaces that's based off of the selected curves. It does not mean that those surfaces themselves are selected. So just be aware of that. That's all that matters. Now I can go to that curves menu and I can shut it off. I don't need to be able to see the curves in order to be able to understand the geometry. So now I can see what I've got. If I go to the hardware shade, you can see that I've got nothing but primitives assigned to my object so far. And so what I need to do is I need to create some new shaders and assign them to the body of the tea kettle. To do this, go up to your render menu, go down to multi-lister, and choose shaders. In here, you'll notice that this time, instead of having a black environment and a default shader, you've actually got two different shaders, the default shader and default shader 2, and then a different environment shader. I'll show you what that one looks like here in a minute. But the first default shader is just the regular one. The second one actually has some reflection to it. We're going to use both of these to create the shaders for this model, because the actual real Alessi Teakettle has a very reflective chrome body. That'll be more like a shiny surface, like shader 2, default shader number 2. And the handle, the grip, the decorative parts of the grip and the lid knob are all sort of a muted, rubbery kind of plastic. And so we want something that's not quite as reflective. So we'll probably use the default shader as a basis for that model. Regardless, first thing that we need to do is we need to create our shaders. So remember how we do that last week. Go to the Edit menu, choose Copy, and then double-click the shader to change its properties. The first thing would be to change the name. So let's do the blue handle first. So I'm just going to type in blue. Let's call that by the right name, grip, blue grip. The shading model is Lambert, meaning that it'll have no reflective properties at all. The color is not quite right. It is blue, but it's not quite that blue. It's got a little more gray to it. And I'd say something around about there. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it. If you want the exact numbers, it's these that are down here on the RGB values. But I'm just eyeballing it. I have no guarantee that that's correct. But that'll give us a shader that looks decently like the grip on the actual tea kettle. Then, once I've got that first one down, I can create the other shaders that I need from it. So I need a black one, I need a red one. So let's copy the blue grip, double-click it, and let's call this one Red Grip Decoration. I'm just going to abbreviate that DEC. And this time I'm going to change the shader color to a red, and I'm not changing the hue. I'm just changing. I am changing the hue. I'm not changing the value. So that'll ensure that I get exactly the same kinds of shaders. They'll look very similar. It's kind of like a sort of clay colored red. So that's pretty good there. And then I also need a black one. So I'll duplicate that one more time. And this one is the black, and it's the lid knob. That's that color. All right, and then I want to change the color. Remember what I said about black last time? Don't choose the one all the way at the bottom. You won't get any detail in it. Choose the next gray scale color up, and it'll still look black, but it'll give you a little bit more definition. Then we can scroll down. If we need to make any changes to that, we can. In this case, the black lid knob is just that. So that's it. Now, those three shaders are pretty straightforward. They're pretty easy to assign. So let's put them on first, and then we'll talk about this Chrome thing that needs to go in here. So choose Pick Nothing, Pick Object. To assign the blue shader, we need to pick the three parts that it goes on to. That would be the two end caps for the grip and the middle surface there. And if you hover your mouse over those areas, you should be able to select it. You can also move your view if you prefer to make sure you have the correct selections made. Choose the blue grip shader, and then go to the shading button at the bottom and choose Assign Shader. And that'll change that shader to that slightly more subtle blue color. I can do the same thing with the red grip decoration. So I'm going to choose these two parts here. After I've deselected everything else, I pick Object again and then select those two. Go over to red grip decoration, pick it, and then choose a shading and Assign Shader again. That'll choose those and assign the red part to that. The only thing that's black is the lid knob itself, so all I need to do is go again to Pick Nothing, Pick Object, select the lid knob, and then pick the black lid knob shader and assign it. All right, so those are the easy ones. Now, the Chrome shader for the body is a little more challenging, but it's really not that bad. If we go to default shader number 2 and copy it, I'm going to create a copy just in case we need the original default shader for anything. I'm going to go in here, double click that one, and this one I'm going to call it Chrome Body to remember what it is. And the reflectivity I might need to bump up a little more, but it's at 0.5 right now. 0.1 would be like a perfect mirror, I'm sorry, 1 would be a perfect mirror. 0.5 would be about halfway there, so it might be a little dull at 0.5. We might need to make it up, take it up a little higher than that. Maybe not all the way to 1, but maybe kind of close to it. The next thing that I'm going to do is I could adjust this color on the shader again, but notice that there is no Chrome option. I could make it white. That would give me sort of an approximation of a Chrome. I could also make it like a grayscale. That might look a little like Chrome. But they actually have a way for you to do imitation Chrome in this program. And the way that they suggest that you do it is go to your map on the color layer. Notice there's maps for a lot of different options in here, but you want to go to the one that's on the color row here. Click on the word map and scroll down to where it says environments and open that up. Now this part's a little tricky. It says that there is a Chrome shader in there. Do not use that one. It looks terrible. It's like a 1980s version of Chrome. You expect Pac-Man to go by it any day. So don't use this one. Instead, use the one called Sky. It's a better result, and it looks more like Chrome when you assign it to an object anyway. So we've got that one assigned to the object. You can see that there are different parameters for Chrome that you can adjust the brightness of the sun and the halo brightness and the elevation of the sun in the sky and the size of it and everything else about it. The only change I want to make here initially is go to where it says floor parameters, and where it says has floor, turn that off. You'll see why in a minute, but it essentially gives you a better version of Chrome, and you'll get a more convincing looking result. So with that shader created now, and it looks, Chrome-ish, let's go to Pick Nothing, Pick Object, and let's select all the surfaces that need to have that Chrome assigned to it, including the little cylinder that holds up the lid knob. I want to make sure we don't forget that. So the spout, the handle, the body, don't forget the base too. The lid knob support, let's see, the handle, I think that's everything. So go to Chrome Body, choose Shading, and assign Shader. And you'll notice that initially it kind of looks more like a silver colored. That's because that's the last color we used before we assigned the Chrome Body. The Chrome itself won't show up until we do a rendering. And that's the last thing we're going to do today. But these are the correct colors for the Alessi Teakettle. If we had modeled the bird on the end of the spout, that would have also been red. The little toruses that go behind the decorative spheres here, those would be black. And some other detail on the body, we would probably also assign shaders to those. But with this basic representation of the teakettle, that's the shaders that we need to assign. So go to File, hit Save, and then let's try rendering this thing out and see what we get. Go to Render to start with, and go to Direct Render, and just hit it. It'll render what's in your scene. And don't panic here. All right. So you see the problem. All of this stuff that's showing up in for our teakettle looks faceted. It looks like, whoa, something went wrong. Initially, whenever you do a rendering in Alias, it sets your settings down to a lower setting so that you get a faster render. You need to be able to change that. You need to change that up to get a more rounded, more exact representation of your model. But don't worry, you do not have to remodel everything. So here's how to change it. Let me show you real quick. If you go to Render and you choose Globals, the global quality render setting is at the top. It's called Global Quality Level, and it's currently set to Medium. Change that to High. Actually, you only got 3 options there. But you can adjust even further the quality of the high. Let me show you a quick render just to show you the difference between medium and high. And I'm going to do another quick direct render. I've still got my window open here, so I'm just going to draw a box around the area I want to re-render. And you'll see the difference between the first version and the second version. It's a little better, just subtly better, not very much. To make it noticeably better, what we need to do is we need to make it, and we need to take this global quality level high up even higher. So go to where it says global quality parameters, right underneath global quality level. And instead of having the mesh tolerance set to 0.97, change this. And I'm going to change it dramatically just to show you the difference. 0.001. Let's start with that one and let's see what we get. So 0.001 for the setting on the mesh tolerance. Hit enter, and then come back to this view and draw another box around here and re-render that area and then look at the results. Let's see what we get. Whoa, much better. Yeah, all right. So this time we can see everything's fairly clear. We're getting a pretty decent result. There's something that doesn't look quite right about the chrome, though. You can see the problem is that it's not reflecting anything. We told it to be reflective, but it's not reflecting anything. The only thing we see in there is the background that's in our scene, which is that same sky shader, by the way. But it's not actually reflecting the environment. The reason that it's not is because I went and I did a straight away direct render with no options set for it. So let's close that window, go back and close the render globals window option box as well, and then come down to the render menu, go down to direct render and choose the options button. When you do this, it's going to let you pick how you render. Raycaster by default does not have any options for reflections or refractions. So it's just the basic surfaces, and that's why we're not seeing any reflections, even though we have reflections turned on. So switch it to Ray Tracer, and then let's try it again. Go to Go, and this time we should be able to see some reflections and some refractions, hopefully, and we'll go from there. Notice that it's taking dramatically longer to render now. That's because we have the global quality level set higher, and also because it has to now calculate those reflections for our object. So this is taking quite a bit longer, but the quality is much, much better. And you can see now we've got the reflections. We've got the reflection of the handle, the lid knob, and we even have that big blue box that was in the background that I was talking about before. So that's where we'll end it for today. I want to show you how to do shadows. I want to show you how to do a couple other things in here. But for this exercise, this is where we're going to end. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.